يا ابو على الشلال يا غيات من ادابيك ابوي عبد القادر يا سيدي العياط عليك يا ابو على الشلال يا مولاي عبد القادر اكون معنا حاضر نسينا من المقابر يا نفع الله بك سيدي العياط عليك شيخي والنادي بيك يا ابو على الشلال
I'm just an ordinary man. Org 65-9, how I stand. Young dude with an overzealous plan to feed his daughter with some money in his hand and probably put a nice ring on the missus. My goals, I stare at from a distance. It's a canyon between me and the cliff, trying to build a bridge just to get over it, to the greener grass, not fall in the pit of depression. That stress will make you sick, along with the wolves trying to blow down your house. Broads and niggas the same, they all run their mouth. Rappers get bold thinking they trying to call you out, until you rock in front of their homies, knock them out. Yeah, I did that, that's not what I'm all about. Trying to be better today, so I pray. Everybody asking about every failure, every success. It's all a life experience that gets you closer to learning what's your individual purpose here on this earth. My whole purpose of this riot shit is to go against the grain and inspire. I've been there, fuck the cool shit. It's all about moving. And I just pray that me and you can be the best we can today. Nine-True Crew, LA riot shit.
Peace, peace, peace. One time for my man Thurz. That's from his project LA Riots. It's called Prayer. Excuse me. Amazing artist. Please check him out. Thurz, like as in Thursday. Thurz. Thurz. One time for my man. Thank you for joining, watching. I'm Rami Salam El. Man, that song is deep, man. It kind of moved me. So I was gonna read. Now we'll go with it. So I'm gonna read just a little bit about the five. It's about the different five prophets. The Amor is often mentioned, and it's also on our nationality cards. Noble Drew Ali, Confucius, Buddha, Muhammad, and Jesus. Those are the five prophets. But it's not just those five. There's many prophets. So please do your research and look into all prophets, because we're supposed to honor all true and divine prophets. But I'm going to just read these five. Ali. The last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali. Who, in these days, that's another thing. Just in these days. There's going to be some prophets in the future. Believe that. I know that. The last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali, who is prepared divinely in time by Allah to redeem men from their sinful ways, and to warn them of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. Noble Drew Ali, or Sheikh Sharif Abdul Ali, was born of a natural birth by and through his mother, whose aboriginal dwelling place is a Mexam, the land of her and his Moabite Moorish forefathers. The provincial location of their dwelling place was in the territory now corporately known as North Carolina, at central North America. Prophet Ali began teaching his people, the fallen Moors, the direct descendants of the ancient Moabites, to be themselves, to turn their hearts and minds back to the ancient divine creed and governmental principles of their Moabite Moorish forefathers. Prophet Ali reestablished open and public teachings of the ancient science and creed of Islam in northwest Mexam/America for the spiritual, social, and political benefit of all Moorish Americans, etc. Prophet Ali officially established a humanitarian mission movement in North America, known as the Moorish Divine and National Movement, with the confirmed purpose of reestablishing the living Moorish nation and placing the Moors on a firm social and political foundation. He taught such things as necessary and needed for the newly conscious Moors to link themselves, ourselves, back with the families of nations. Thus, one sees the manifest activities among the Moors, the resurrection of the Moorish nation. Lawful recognition and expansive literary, historical, national, and jurisprudence-oriented studies are a definitive sign and indication of the powerful influences of his works, instructions, and teachings. Now it is common fare in America to see broad and enthusiastic endeavors among the people, marking the resurgence of the old literary and civilization principles of ancient Moorish civilization. Among the Asiatic/African adepts, sages, and ancient history scholars, Noble Drew Ali has been referred to as Muhammad III. All right. Now we're going to get to Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad's nationality is Kamite, Khamite. He was the founder of the Uniting of Islam by the command of the great universal God Allah. Muhammad was a direct descendant of Hagar, mother of Ishmael, son of Abraham. Hagar and Abraham was of Moabite, Hamitite, or Kamite descent. Prophet Muhammad came to fulfill the works of Jesus, or Yahshua, and was known by his students and scholars of history to bring back together, collectively, those ancient divine principles which had been veiled within the corrupted doctrines of the derivative religions. Muhammad was considered a protege of Yahshua ben Yosef, or Jesus. In the long history of battles between the Moors and the Roman nations, Muhammad followed in the tradition of Hannibal the Moor, in his works to preserve principles of civilization, which were under constant and periodical attacks from the Romans. Muhammad battled to counter the aggressions made into Asia and Africa by the Roman ruler Constantine the Great. And just right here real quick, I wanted to say I was doing some studying because to be honest with you, I'm a bit ignorant of the history of Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and really the history of Islam as the religion that we modernly know. And so I was doing some research, and I have this book called The Life of Muhammad. In fact, hold on. Let's see. Okay, cool. I was trying to and it's kind of bad for myself because normally I take notes, but I didn't take notes in this book yet, and so I was trying to find the exact place, but I think I found a page where at least it can kind of highlight what I'm saying. Yeah, perfect actually. Okay, boom. Life of Muhammad. So this is the book right here, and I'm gonna just read a quick little excerpt because it's speaking about and keeping in mind it's talking about war and conquering, because oftentimes when you look into Islam, the history of Islam, they always talk about, you know, the Muslims conquered lands and took over and forced Islam upon African people, or forced Islam on people. So I just wanted to read this real quick. Oh, yeah, sorry. Fighting is to be for the sake of God, not for our own sake or out of anger or aggrandizement. And even fighting is to be free from excesses, for excesses are displeasing to God. Fighting is between parties of combatants. Assaults on individuals are forbidden. Aggression against a religion is to be met by active resistance, for such aggression is worse than bloodshed. Muslims are not to fight near the sacred mosque unless an attack is first made by the enemy. Fighting near the sacred mosque interferes with the public right of pilgrimage. But if the enemy attacks, Muslims are free to reply, this being the just reward of aggression. But if the enemy desists, Muslims must desist also, and forgive and forget the past. Fighting is to continue so long as religious persecution lasts and religious freedom is not established. Religion is for God. The use of force or pressure in religion is wrong. If the Kafirs desist from it and make religion free, Muslims are to desist from fighting the Kafirs. Arms are to be taken up against those who commit excesses. When excesses cease, fighting must cease also. Categorically, we may say the verses teach the following rules. And there's a verse in the Quran that corresponds to what I'm reading. War is to be resorted to only for the sake of God, and not for the sake of any selfish motives, not for aggrandizement or the advancement of any other interest. We can go to war only against one who attacks us first. We can fight only those who fight against us. We cannot fight against those who take no part in warfare. Even after the enemy has initiated the attack, it is our duty to keep warfare within limits. It is our duty. To extend the war, either territorially or in respect of weapons used, is wrong. We are to fight only a regular army charged by the enemy to fight on his side. We are not to fight others on the enemy side. In warfare, immunity is to be afforded to all religious rites and observances. If the enemy spares the places where religious ceremonies are held, the Muslims also must desist from fighting in such places. If the enemy uses a place of worship as a base for attack, then Muslims may return the attack. No blame will attach to them if they do so. No fighting is allowed even in the neighborhood of religious places. To attack religious places and to destroy them or to do any kind of harm to them is absolutely forbidden. A religious place used as a base of operations may invite a counter-attack. The responsibility for... let me hold on right here, because I just watched this documentary about the Moors in Spain. And it was breaking down how when the Moors went into Spain, they didn't destroy any of the churches or the synagogues, I believe, or just the religious places of worship that were already established for Christians, but that they allowed everyone to worship how they chose, and there was churches. Well, this is a different interview, but I found it in that there was churches, temples, and synagogues all next to each other, mosques all next to each other, all operating fine. However, when the Spanish when the Spanish and the Spaniards and the Christians, when they took back over power, they were destroying everything. They were they were breaking down most of the temples, except for like a few that are just too amazing to destroy, like the buildings. But they were destroying a lot of the religious places of worships, and changing from mosque and temples over to churches and putting crosses on them and all of that. And you can still see that in some places today. So I just found it interesting, the contrast between what Muslims do, or what Muslims are called to do, especially in war, versus what Christians do and operate. It's interesting. But sorry, let me get back to this, and then we'll get back to the other prophets. This is, by the way, this is what happens usually more when we study. One thing will lead to another, and then you find yourself way off on some other tangent that you didn't even start on. A religious place used as a base of operations may invite a counterattack. The responsibility for any harm done to the place will then rest with the enemy, not with Muslims. If the enemy realizes the danger and the mistake of using a religious place as a base and changes the battlefront, then Muslims must conform to the change. The fact that the enemy, started the attack from a religious place is not to be used as an excuse for attacking that place. Just righteous, man. Out of reverence, Muslims must change their battlefront as soon as the enemy does so. Fighting is to continue only so long as interference with the religion and religious freedom lasts. When religion becomes free and interference with it is no longer permitted, and the enemy declares and begins to act accordingly, then there is to be no war, even if it is the enemy who starts it, or who started it. That's deep, man. Oh, and here, matter of fact, here's a verse from the Quran in the book. Surah 8, 39 and 41. I think that's how you say it. Or chapter 8, verse 39 and 41 through 41. Say to those who disbelieve, if they desist, that which is past will be forgiven them. And if they return thereto, then verily the example of the former people has already gone before them. And fight them until there is no persecution, and religion is wholly for Allah. But if they desist, then surely Allah is watchful of what they do. And if they turn their backs, then know that Allah is your protector. What an excellent protector, and what an excellent helper. Well, I guess that didn't really highlight too much of it, but really I just wanted to highlight the fact that the Quran teaches that, war is, what did it say? Religion. War is only for religion, for religious freedom, and not for any other selfish motive. So that's powerful. And that once an enemy stops, then Muslims are supposed to stop and forget and forgive and forget the past. Just completely move forward. And I highlight that because oftentimes in the press right now, you have the media trying to get us to believe that Muslims are these radical extremist people that just bomb and kill anybody for their religion, which is completely bogus when you study the actual Quran yourself, and when you study what Prophet Muhammad said and what Prophet Muhammad taught, and the history of Islam and what Prophet Muhammad was about. Because if you really look into it, they didn't start warring with anyone until it was like a last resort. They were getting persecuted and ran out of their country and followed and persecuted some more just for practicing their religion. That's it. Wasn't harming nobody, wasn't doing nothing to nobody, just doing their own thing, praying their own way. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Now, back to the book. Jesus, Prophet Jesus. Jesus was of the true blood of the ancient Canaanites and Moabites and the inhabitants of Africa. Let me pause for a second on this. Something I find interesting that no one seems to highlight, because we always hear, why are we always worshiping that white Jesus? This line right here, Jesus was of the true blood of the ancient Canaanites and Moabites and the inhabitants of Africa, is in the Quran. In the Quran that Drew Ali brought, and he brought that back in the late 1910s and 1920s. Officially, 1926 is when the Quran was published. So, in 1926, Noble Drew Ali let us know that, contrary to all the images that we're seeing now and have been seeing, Jesus was of the true blood of the ancient Canaanites and Moabites and the inhabitants of Africa, the people from Africa. He was of the true blood of the people of Africa. Africa. So it's not no confusion. It's not no, well, maybe, because it's bronze. No. Us. Just so we're clear. Noble Drew Ali made this very clear way back then. It's funny no one wants to mention that, though. Let me get back to Jesus. Jesus, the true blood of ancient Canaanites, Moabites, and inhabitants of Africa, seeking to redeem his people in those days from the pressure of the pale-skinned nations of Europe. Rome crucified him according to their law. Jesus' proper person name, before the altering of the records and scriptures by deviant European sociologists and translators, is Joshua. So, just like for us, we're called black people right now, or African Americans. Well, before we had that label put on us, and that sort of brand, that sort of massaging of history, we were known as Moors. Likewise, this brother that is called Jesus now, before that label was put on him, he was known as Yahshua ben Yosef, to be exact. Jesus' holy name is Emmanuel. I gotta study Emmanuel. I don't know what that means. Upon his travels in Hindustan, India, he was often referred to as the living oracle of Allah, and was acknowledged as the Buddha of enlightenment by the Brahma Sabba, Sabba, a high priesthood among the Hindus. Yahshua had studied and mastered the texts of the Vedas, Atharva Veda, the four sacred books, the Avesta, and expounded upon the wisdom of Gautama Sakyamuni. Let me spell some of this stuff out. The Atharva Veda is Atharva-Veda. Atharva, that's it. Atharva Veda. Avesta is Avesta, and Gautama Sakyamuni is Guatama Sakyamuni. And it's very important that we study the Vedas and the Avesta. Just look those up and understand what we're really supposed to be on right now. The next prophet is Prophet Buddha. Is generally spoken of as in reference to the last Buddha, Gautama Sakyamuni, who was a prince of the Sakya tribe of those of Hindustan, India. Gautama incarnated about 600 years before the natural birth of Yahshua. Okay, so yeah, Buddha was 600 years before Jesus, and was born in the northeast territory of Hindustan, where numerous Moorish dynasties had thrived. Among these were the Mauryan dynasty, the Gupta dynasty, and the Nanda dynasty. Thus, the apparent proliferation and infusion of ancient astrological and cosmological character is evidenced in Hindu culture. Therefore, illumination of the mind and body with knowledge of self and knowledge of the divine laws of nature are integral to the teachings of Buddhism. The word Buddha means the enlightened and wise sage, the great teacher and reformer, and the perfectly enlightened one. One who is bestowed the title of Buddha is the one master teacher who is considered to have mastered the lower self and has completely conquered the lower self to the point of having forgotten it. I'm far from Buddha. That's real, man. That's powerful. Conquer your lower self so you don't even remember that you got one. That's deep. And Noble Drali explains what our lower self is in the Quran, but I'm not going to read that. I want you to read that. In other words, the Buddhist, through determination and studious disciplines, denies the self for the purpose of transforming to the higher self. Buddhism teaches of the unity of all things and expresses that from time to time a deity or master sage, who having reached that mental and spiritual state called nirvana, would appear and would be called the Buddha. The reader is therefore reminded that the word Buddha is a spiritual title and not a personal name. So that's something really important. I didn't even realize that till I started studying, because I always just said Buddha was Buddha. But Buddha is just like a title, just like Christ is a title. Jew is a title. But we're not going to get into that. And the last one is Confucius. Prophet Confucius, the master of philosophy of China, Tieni, T-E-I-N-I, I think that's the proper name for China, in Asia, was born about 500 years before Yahshua. Okay, so just so we have a timeline, it's Gautama Sakyamuni, that was 600 years before Jesus, then Confucius was 500 years before Jesus, then we go to Jesus, and then after Jesus is Muhammad, and then after Muhammad is Ali. Just so we have a timeline of things. And there's prophets in between, just so you know. Shout out to Sikhism. I want to start studying that, because there's some very powerful messengers and prophets in the history and that culture. So that's a reminder to myself and for you to check it out. Sikhism, Sikhs. S-I-K-H-I-E-I-S-M. Sikhism. Yeah. Confucianism refers to the ancient philosophies, doctrines, teachings, and or the adherence to those philosophies and disciplines taught by Confucius, Kung Fu Sei, etc., Confucianism, etc. Confucianism is an instructional and teaching system which expounds upon morality and ethics with a disciplined emphasis put on the study of divine and natural laws, and does not promote the blind and unqualified worship of any god. The adherence to moral principles and ethics is applied in civil affairs, family affairs, and are commonly promoted as part of the general social duties of all Tieni. And so Tieni, China, has an ancient history of association with Confucian philosophies and governmental principles, from which the basis of jurisprudence and education is drawn. A more extensive and detailed study of the prophets, their works, and their teachings indicates and confirms that the displayed common philosophical and character traits, such as being highly evolved spiritually. Let me read that one more time. A more extensive and detailed study of the prophets, their works, and their teachings indicates and confirms that they displayed common philosophical and character traits, such as being highly evolved spiritually. They were principled, moral, and ethical men in general, An objective review of their tempered missions reveals that they were staunch advocates for human progress and justice, and were dedicated social reformers. Usually the prophets' work was directly geared to the metaphysical matters of cause and effects in relationships to abuses made against humanity. They also addressed human debasement issues, being the results of deeds and acts made by the unclean hands of alien occupational governments, etc. Other observable and common traits exhibited among the prophets was that their actions were rooted in love for humanity and the desire for cultivation of civilized order, founded with justice as a principle for guidance. Yeah, that's the end of it there. So, just wanted to put those on the record, and to I wanted to say something. Oh, about Confucius. There's a movie. There's a movie with, I'm blanking on the brother's name, but he's the guy, Yang Chow Fat, I think it is. Excuse me if I that may not be the correct name, but I know it's the brother from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. The same lead actor in that is playing Confucius in this movie. I believe it's titled Confucius. So just look it up. Matter of fact, I'll put the link in the description so you can see it. But please watch that movie, because it just expands on that little brief statement about Confucius, and excuse me, and it's just an awesome movie. You know what I mean? It really informed me. I didn't really understand or even know about Confucius like that, and when I watched it, it gave me a really profound respect for that man, that prophet. And I also wanted to say, in general, to study all 5 of those prophets more in depth. Study the history of them as individuals, study the history of their religious movements, and yeah, those 2, and apply the information. That's number 3. You know what I mean? That's the biggest thing with all of these prophets, with all of this information. If you just studying it to read it and to have the information, it just sits in your bookshelves or in your computer, in your files, or whatever the case is. If you're not applying it, it's just taking up space. It's just, it's stagnant. And we got to be active. We can't be passive. We can't be slow motion. We got to be moving on it. Yeah, I think we're going to end it right there. Yeah. Thank you. 5 prophets. I think we got it. Yeah. Thank you. Peace and love.